Hi, I'm Emma Watson, and this is the story of how my love for baking helped me discover what real success means, and also showed me the ugly side of prejudice within my husband's wealthy family. For 4 years, I lived a double life. During the day, I happily ran my cozy little bakery in the neighborhood. People came in for fresh bread, cinnamon rolls, and warm conversations. But at night, I switched roles. I secretly managed one of the most successful restaurant chains in the country. Nobody knew that I was the person behind it, not even my husband. I met Thierry Henry one morning outside my bakery. He was kind, down-to-earth, and really interested in my dream of owning a bakery. He wasn't like the usual rich people I'd met before. He didn't look down on small businesses. When he finally told me that his family owned the famous Henry Financial Group, I was shocked. But still, Thierry felt different. He enjoyed my simple cinnamon rolls more than any fancy meal. What he didn't know, and what I never told anyone, was that I had already built something big. 11 years ago, I started a restaurant brand called Bellissimo Bistro using my grandmother's Italian recipes and a small loan. It started with one small place, but slowly grew into 20 restaurants all across the country. Each location stayed true to our family's cooking and cozy style. I ran everything through a holding company, keeping my name out of the spotlight. For me, it was always about the food and the people, not the fame. Things changed after Thierry and I got married. His family, especially his mother Amy, never took my bakery seriously. At family dinners, she would make little remarks. "Surely now that you're a Henry," she would say, swirling her wine, "you'll give up that little bakery. It doesn't suit our image." I would smile and stay quiet, all while secretly working on expanding Bellissimo Bistro to even more cities. The biggest twist? The Henry family, including Amy, loved eating at my restaurants. In fact, Amy often held her business dinners at our flagship location. She even bragged about how close she was to the mysterious owner, never knowing that owner was me. Everything came crashing down at Thanksgiving dinner this year. We were all gathered at the Henry Mansion, and Amy was in full bragging mode. She had just hosted a charity event at my restaurant, Bella Cusina, and wouldn't stop talking about it. "It's such a classy place," she gushed. "So exclusive and elegant. Not like those little bakeries that write on sidewalk chalkboards." She said it while staring straight at me. I just sat there, smiling quietly, knowing something she didn't. I owned both the bakery she looked down on and the restaurant she proudly claimed as her own. I kept my eyes on my plate, quietly eating while my mind was on something else, an exciting contract I had just signed earlier that morning. Bellissimo's, my restaurant chain, was finally going international. It was a huge moment in my career, but no one at the dinner table had any idea. Especially not Amy, my mother-in-law, who was just getting warmed up with her usual comments. "Let's be real," Amy said, waving her hand dramatically. "We're talking about a real culinary empire here. This is what a real business looks like, Emma, not some little bakery selling cupcakes to children." Thierry's father, Nathan, joined in. "She's right. Running a serious restaurant business is not easy. It takes real skills, connections, investment, proper education. It's not something you can handle with a few recipes and a smile." I felt Thierry sit up a little straighter beside me, tense and clearly uncomfortable, but I gently squeezed his hand under the table to calm him. I was used to these jabs. For 4 years, I had heard comments like this at almost every family event. It used to hurt. But now, I had bigger things to think about, like the major announcement Bellissimo's was going to make tomorrow. Amy, still full of energy, suddenly smiled. "Oh." Speaking of serious businesses, I've invited the owner of Bella Cusina to speak at the Henry Foundation dinner next month. They never appear in public, but surely they won't turn me down. I'm one of their best customers, after all. Then Thierry's sister Olivia added one last blow. "Well, at least now we won't have to listen to boring bakery stories at these dinners anymore. Let's keep our conversations about real businesses from now on." Everyone around the table laughed politely. Thierry opened his mouth to speak up, but I had already made up my mind. I couldn't sit there in silence any longer. For 4 years, I had hidden my success. I had smiled through their rude remarks and watched them praise Bella Cusina, completely unaware that I was the one behind it. I reached into my purse, pulled out my phone, and sent a text I had saved for just the right moment. Somewhere across the city, my executive team was about to launch something called Protocol Henry, a plan I had designed for this exact situation. "You're right, Olivia," I said softly, standing up. "Let's talk about real business. In fact, why don't we meet again tomorrow? How about brunch at Bella Cusina, in the private owner's dining room?" Amy's eyes lit up with excitement. "Oh, Emma, you can't just book that room. It's for the owner only, very exclusive." I smiled, picked up my purse, and looked her right in the eye. "Trust me," I said. "We have a table reserved." I walked out of the mansion, leaving behind a room full of confused faces and one quiet, satisfied smile from Thierry. He had discovered my secret 7 months ago and had patiently waited for this day to come. As I stepped into the cool night air, I couldn't help but smile. Tomorrow's brunch would be unforgettable. In fact, I had a feeling it would be the most important event Bella Cusina had ever hosted. Some moments in life, just like certain meals, are best served cold. The next morning, I arrived at Bellissimo's main location 3 hours before the scheduled brunch. The restaurant looked different in the early hours. It was calm, quiet, and filled with possibility. As I walked through the kitchen, the sound of my heels echoed on the shiny floors. The staff, busy with prep work, looked up in surprise. They were used to seeing me in chef's clothes or casual wear, not in the sharp Chanel suit I had chosen for this special day. "Is everything ready for Protocol Henry?" I asked with a small smile. Tyler, my executive chef who had been with me for 9 years, nodded and grinned. "Already working on the special menu," he said. "I can't wait to see their faces when they taste your Helen's original tiramisu." At exactly 10 a.m., the Henry family arrived. Amy led the way, holding her head high as if she were royalty. She walked confidently up to the maitre d' and said proudly, "We're here for brunch with the owner. I'm Amy Henry." "Of course, Mrs. Henry," said Adam, my longtime maitre d'. He kept his face calm and professional. "Right this way, please. I'll take you to the owner's private dining room." He led them through the elegant main dining area, past the wine cellar I had personally designed and stocked over the years, and up to the private floor. Thierry came in separately and caught my eye as he entered. He gave me a small smile, clearly enjoying what was about to happen. The private dining room was my favorite place in the whole restaurant. It was filled with special memories, photos of every Bella Cusina location, awards we had won, and most importantly, a large portrait of my grandmother standing proudly in her first restaurant in Rome. She had taught me everything. Amy stepped into the room and immediately looked at the head of the table. The chair was empty. "Will the owner be joining us soon?" she asked, gently smoothing her expensive blouse. I stepped forward and smiled, feeling years of silence and patience finally come to a beautiful end. "The owner is already here," I said softly. "Welcome to my restaurant." "I'm the owner," I said quietly, stepping out of the shadows. The room went completely silent. You could have heard a pin drop. Amy's face changed so quickly, it was like watching a scene in a movie. First came confusion, then disbelief, followed by shock, and finally, pure horror. Nathan, her husband, dropped his expensive designer glasses in surprise. Olivia, Thierry's sister, opened her mouth as if to speak, but no words came out. She just sat there, blinking like a fish out of water. "This has to be a joke," Amy finally said, her voice shaky. You run a bakery." I smiled calmly and walked over to the head of the table, taking my seat with confidence. "I do run a bakery," I said, "but I also run several other businesses. Bella Cusina is just the most well-known one." I reached for the small remote beside my plate and pressed a button. A large screen came down from the ceiling. On it, the financial overview of Bella Cusina appeared, clear and bold. It showed everything: 20 locations across the country, over $200 million in yearly revenue, and our upcoming international expansion. "That's not possible," Nathan whispered. But his trained banker's eyes were already scanning the numbers, and I could tell he knew the truth. He couldn't deny it. "Let me tell you a little story," I said, smiling warmly as I nodded to the staff to start serving the food. It all began with my grandmother's small restaurant in Rome. That's where I learned that great food isn't just about ingredients. It's about love, family, and tradition. As each course was brought to the table, I explained its meaning. The appetizer was based on my grandmother's homemade bread recipe. The pasta was the very first dish I learned to cook as a child. And the main course? That was the signature recipe that helped launch Bella Cucina 11 years ago. I took those recipes and a dream. I continued, and I built something amazing. The bakery came later. It was just a side project that let me stay connected to people and do what I love with my hands. Amy just stared at her plate. Her fork hadn't moved. Her food was untouched. She looked stunned. All those times you bragged about knowing the owner, I said gently. You really did know me. You just didn't believe I was someone worth knowing. Thierry reached for my hand under the table and gave it a gentle squeeze. He looked proud of me, proud of the truth finally coming out. He had found out my secret 7 months earlier during a surprise visit to my office. But instead of being angry, he was amazed and secretly amused by his family's ignorance. But why keep it all a secret? Olivia asked. Her voice no longer had that arrogant tone. She sounded genuinely curious now. Because real success, I said with a soft smile, isn't about being noticed. It's about doing what you love, staying true to yourself, and letting the results speak for you. I smiled and replied, for me, it's always been about creating something that truly matters. Every time someone celebrates a birthday, an anniversary, or even a quiet moment in one of our restaurants, it means something to me. Every time a food critic praises our food for being real and full of heart, it means more than any personal award. And every time your mother bragged to others about our great service, without knowing I was the one behind it, that meant everything. Right then, Adam, our maitre d', walked into the room holding a white envelope. He handed it to me. The documents you requested, Mrs. Watson Henry, he said respectfully. I opened the envelope and slid the papers across the table to Amy and Nathan. This, I said, looking around the table, is why I invited you here today. They looked at me, puzzled. Bella Cucina is expanding, I continued. We're going international, and we're looking for new investors. As per the agreement, the Henry Financial Group has the first chance to accept or reject the offer. Nathan's hands trembled slightly as he picked up the papers and started reading. His eyes quickly scanned the proposal. The numbers were clear and impressive. The potential profits were huge. Amy's face turned pale. She looked like she couldn't decide if she was shocked, embarrassed, or both. You're offering us this chance? She asked, barely above a whisper. Even after how we treated you? I stood up and walked over to the large portrait of my grandmother, hanging on the wall. You once told me that the restaurant business required class, connections, and big money, I said, turning back to them. But you were wrong. What it really takes is passion, honesty, and a dream. And, I added with a small smile, it also takes the ability to see an opportunity, even if it doesn't come in the package you expected. As they sat in silence, trying to take everything in, I nodded to the staff to bring out the final course. It was our classic tiramisu, made from my grandmother's original recipe. The same dessert Amy had raved about for years, never knowing it came from the woman she once called just a baker. I sat down again and looked around the table. The real question is, I said, folding my hands neatly in front of me, are you ready to be part of a real business? The room went quiet. The only sound was the soft clinking of silverware as Thierry enjoyed his dessert, a proud smile on his face. Finally, Nathan broke the silence. He looked down at the financial report again, then back up at me. All this time, he said, his voice cracking, we thought we were the ones giving you advice about business, but you were the one quietly building an empire. I finished his sentence for him. Yes, I was building something big. But today isn't about making anyone feel bad or embarrassed. It's about looking ahead, as a family and maybe even as business partners. I picked up the small remote and pressed another button. The screen on the wall changed again, showing new images. This time, it was beautiful designs and building plans for new Bella Cucina locations in Manchester, Nantes, and Munich. More slides followed, showing market research, profit predictions, and plans for global growth. This next step will need a lot of investment, I explained. Bella Cucina is ready to go international. The Henry Financial Group has the kind of worldwide connections that could help us. But I paused and looked around the table, making eye contact with each family member. If we're going to work together, we'll need to change how we treat each other. Respect is the foundation of any partnership. Amy slowly placed her spoon on her plate. Her hands were shaking just a little. "Why would you even offer us this chance?" she asked softly. "Not after the way we've treated you." I looked at her and smiled gently. "Because success, without people to share it with, feels empty," I said, thinking of my grandmother's warm kitchen and the lessons she taught me. And sometimes, the greatest victory isn't proving someone wrong, it's giving them a chance to prove themselves right. That's when Olivia, who had been mostly quiet until now, let out a laugh. Not her usual polite and polished laugh, but a real, honest one. "All those times we lectured you about how business works," she said between laughs, "and you were probably sitting there calculating global market strategies in your head." Her laughter broke the heavy mood in the room. Even Amy smiled, although her eyes shimmered with tears. Nathan was still studying the financial papers in front of him. His face was slowly changing, from shock to respect. "These numbers are incredible," he said, almost to himself. "Your profits, your growth, and you did all of this without big investors or outside money?" I nodded. Every Bella Cucina restaurant was built with reinvested earnings. No bank loans, no investors, just smart decisions, great food, and my grandmother's recipes. Amy looked at me and asked softly, "But the bakery? Why keep running it when you have all of this?" I smiled, thinking of the smell of fresh bread, the happy faces of kids pressing their noses to the glass display, waiting for cookies. "The bakery keeps me grounded," I said. "It reminds me why I started all this. Not just for money, but for love. Every cupcake I sell means something. It brings joy to people. That joy matters just as much as any 5-star review Bellissimo Bistro receives." Thierry gently took my hand and looked at his family. "That's what I fell in love with," he said. "Not just her success, but her heart." I didn't even know all of this was happening behind the scenes. But now I realize everything that made Bella Cucina successful, like passion, honesty, and staying true to myself, was the same thing my husband's family had once ignored or looked down on. That day completely changed how our family worked together. Nathan, the serious and sharp-minded banker, finally saw me not just as Thierry's wife or a woman who ran a bakery, but as a strong businesswoman. We spent hours together that afternoon talking about how to expand the brand around the world. He even gave me helpful advice about international markets and business strategies. Olivia, with her background in marketing, got excited right away. She began sharing fun and fresh ideas for launching Bella Cucina as a global brand. Her energy lit up the room. And then there was Amy. To everyone's surprise, she quietly said, "I want to learn how to bake." She wiped tears from her eyes and added, "I want to understand how you built something so amazing from just flour, sugar, and dreams." Over the next year, everything changed. The Henry Financial Group became an official partner in Bella Cucina's international journey. But even more important than business was what happened to our family. Amy started showing up at my bakery every Sunday morning. She put on an apron, tied her hair back, and worked beside me to learn how to make croissants and other pastries. Slowly, she began to see what I had always known. Being a baker wasn't less than. It was something beautiful, something real. Nathan stopped talking about proper family image and social class. Instead, he started talking about how real success comes from heart, not just money. Today, Bella Cucina has 40 locations in countries around the world. In our original restaurant, there's now a wall of family photos, including one of Amy, smiling proudly as she holds up the first batch of cookies she made on her own. The bakery still opens early every morning, and I still make time each week to be there. I roll dough, knead bread, and connect with customers. That little shop reminds me where it all began. Last month, when we opened our Nantes location, Amy stood right next to me as I cut the ribbon. She leaned in and whispered, "I was so wrong. Success isn't about how things look on the outside. It's about having the bravery to follow your passion, even if others don't understand it." I gently squeezed her hand, thinking about how far we'd come. "Sometimes," I said, "real success isn't about proving people wrong. It's about giving them the chance to grow and change." Thierry stood a few feet away, smiling, probably remembering that unforgettable Thanksgiving dinner when everything shifted. Now, our family gatherings are different. We still talk about business, but we also laugh, bake, share stories, and taste Amy's newest pastries. And me? I'm still living the dream that started with one simple recipe and a whole lot of heart. I run a large business now, an empire, some might say. Bella Cucina has grown beyond what I ever imagined. We have restaurants across the country and even around the world. There are meetings to attend, contracts to sign, and big decisions to make every day. But even with all that, I still wake up early every morning just like I did in the beginning. I go to my little bakery, roll up my sleeves, and start baking.
Why?
Because to me, success was never about becoming rich or famous. It was never about choosing between being a small business owner or a big name in the food world. It was always about staying true to what I love, baking, creating, and connecting with people through food. Baking at dawn reminds me of where I started. It reminds me of my grandmother, who taught me that real joy comes from putting love into your work. Whether I'm making one loaf of bread or opening a new restaurant in another country, the heart behind it is the same. To be successful doesn't mean you have to forget your roots. You don't have to give up the simple things to achieve something great. In fact, staying humble, honest, and passionate is what makes real success possible. It's not about being small or big. It's about holding on to what matters most and letting it guide you through everything life brings. Sometimes life brings surprises. People who once doubted you might change. They may have looked down on you before, thinking you were just a baker or not good enough. But one day, they might stand beside you, finally seeing the truth that was always there. They might even want to learn from you. And that, to me, is just as meaningful as any award or profit report. The best part about building something beautiful is watching how it brings people together. A successful recipe is not just about one ingredient. It's about how all the different pieces, flour, sugar, time, and care, blend together to create something wonderful. The same goes for life and success. It's not just about talent or money or connections. It's about love, hard work, kindness, and believing in yourself even when others don't. It's about making room for change, for yourself and for those around you. When I look back at everything, where I started, what I built, and how far we've come as a family, I feel proud. Not just of the business, but of the story behind it. The story that says success isn't one thing. It's a mix, like a good recipe. And when everything comes together just right, it creates something unforgettable. Just like the best dishes. Just like the best stories.